So we stopped by the Paradise Never booth here at PAX East to talk to Calvin about your game. Can you give us the quick pitch? What kind of game is it?
Paradise Never is an action RPG with a time loop structure. So you and your friends start a revolution. You live on an island that's a colony of France. It's 2027, so it's near future, and your revolution that you start doesn't turn out. So by day 3, you are wiped out, and fortunately, there is a goddess who is watching over, who does not tolerate any loss of human life, and so anytime anyone dies, whether it's a friend or an enemy, you are sucked back in time, and so you're sucked first to an underworld where the goddess lives and some other creatures. And that's sort of where you prepare for your next run through. So the game generates randomly each time, and so it's different each time, and it's almost like it's structured in the idea that each time through is a different timeline. So things could be different. Characters could have had a different past. Things could have happened differently for characters in their past. But the game is a RPG. So it's an RPG. It is not like a roguelike structure where you lose your progress. It's very carefully structured so that you keep your progress and you progress, you work your way through a storyline, but you do it by experiencing many different timelines and experiencing the outcome of many different choices that you make. And yeah, so that's the short, or if possible, version, I guess.
Sort of sounds like it's almost the reverse of permadeath, if you will.
Yeah, in a way, it's yeah, that's an interesting way of putting it. I've played a lot of permadeath roguelike games, and I love the mechanics of those games, and I love the idea in those games that your progress, like in a typical roguelike, is your own self, right? It's your own knowledge and abilities. You learn what an item does, and now when you find that item, you have this whole repertoire of actions that you have, and it's much more powerful to you once you've played the game many times than when the first time you encountered it. And so that aspect of the roguelikes is there. So there's all kinds of sort of just information you yourself as the player learn. But there is also an element of, it does have progress. So the way the progress mechanic structured is you keep anything on your phone, okay? So in your in-game phone, so you can collect information, you can collect contact details. Characters have letters that they can upload that you can then deliver to other characters in other timelines. A great example of that, which I love to tell, which is sort of a minor spoiler. So there are minor characters which generate differently each time. So it could be this character, it could be that character. They could generate with different personalities, but there's a couple, they're a married couple, and 6 years ago, so this is just a side quest, 6 years ago there was an accident that killed one of them. But the way the world generates each time, it's a different timeline, so it could be this one or it could be this one. It could be either that actually died in that accident. But they each relate to you the same story, and they each describe their own regrets. And when you get into it with them, they tell you that they've written a letter that they wish they could have, of all the things they wish they could have said. So you can take that letter like on your phone for them and then actually deliver it to that person in another timeline. And so in that instance, that's how you resolve their sort of subquest, right? And so there's a practical reward for that. But really that's the soul of the game, is when you experience these kind of scenarios, and that kind of, yeah, the alternate timeline storytelling, I guess, is really what I'm at. So yeah,
I get the feeling that this game is very sort of heavy on relationships, on the characters and that sort of thing. Can you tell us a little bit about your group of friends that you have here that you try to start a revolution with?
Yeah, that's a great question. So there are sort of 7 main characters, and that is what the real core of the story revolves around. So you are really, in terms of progressing through the story, you are resolving that conflict and trying to save your friends, essentially. So that is where the real spoilers would lie for me to give away. But essentially, there's 7 characters that are here. I mean, there's Bridget, who's almost the main character in a way, because you're a silent protagonist. You can sort of set up your character however you want. But Bridget is basically a badass. She doesn't mess around. She's one of the more sort of outgoing or more sort of assertive people. She'll sort of jump in and do what she needs to do, whether that's attacking somebody or whatnot. And then there's Anthony, who's like a newcomer to the island. He's only been there like a few years. He and Bridget are a couple, and the actual revolution starts when Anthony is thrown in jail for something that the locals don't think he should really be thrown in jail for. So it's like it's a rule of France that shouldn't really, nobody thinks should apply. So you bust him out of jail. So that's how you start the revolution. There's Terrence, who's sort of a bit of a loner, and he's quite, something's not quite right sort of with him. He's not, he's a little disturbed, I guess you would say. There is Dina, who follows ancient sort of mystic Christianity. So she's very into sort of destiny and fate. And there is also Susanna, who's your hacker. She's a sort of a outgoing, gregarious, but she's a hacker. She's very smart. And then there's Odell, who is mother to Sergio, who's a little boy, and she really just wants to protect him. So she tries to stay back from everything, but she's also the mastermind. So she's sort of the most wise of the group. She's a little bit older. A little bit smarter. She's sort of come up with she's the one that came up with the plan, but she stays out of the action to kind of protect her kids. So those are the main characters. And you yourself, you have a character creation screen, and you can set yourself up however you want. But there are no stats. Like you don't pick a character class that gives you. You always have the same abilities, but you can pick your name and all that kind of stuff. So yeah.
So what's it been like here at PAX to have people sit down and play your game? Maybe it's a difficult game to sit down at a show like this, but what's it been like seeing people play it and experience what you got here?
That's a fantastic question. So I've been working on this for almost 2 years and almost totally in isolation. So I haven't really talked about it much. I love being on Twitter, but I haven't talked about it on Twitter. I haven't told anybody what it is. And so it's been very, very frightening when I first came here, because I'm like, oh man, like, is it even going to run on the computer? But more than that, like, will people get it? Or when they sit down to play it, will it just be will they be like, eh? And so it's been really positive. And actually, like yesterday I could see some stuff that people weren't understanding, like about just the mechanics, stuff going on with different windows and that. But people were really receptive to the idea of the game. They loved me talking about it. And then last night I worked super hard and actually patched it. Based on sort of the stuff that I had seen that was the little stuff that I could fix. And actually today it's amazing, because yesterday where I was having to walk people through a lot of stuff, I've just been standing back and watching people play it, and they really like it. I love talking about it, so this kind of spiel that I'm giving you, I give almost everybody who comes up here. So they find out, people are they love the concept. And I actually think the concept, working in isolation, if you want to use that word, but really, yeah, I mean, that's what it is. Working in isolation for so long, there's a certain kind of lack, not having outside influence, not having the feedback has allowed me to actually build it into something real specific. So at this point, it's like I'm coming out with this idea, it's so solid in my mind what it is. And at the beginning of the 2 years, it wasn't, right? Because it's been developed all along. But no one has ever come along and said, well, hey, you should do this. And if they had, it probably would have been, a lot of them would have been great suggestions. But it would have been a lot different. And so it's kind of cool, because I realized, and I didn't even think of that before I came here, but I realized, I've got a real specific kind of vision for it, and it's very definite in my mind. And it's really, really highly developed. The game's fairly far along in development as well, but the ideas behind it, I realize are actually probably pretty original, which isn't what I set out to do per se. But
so it becomes a very personal game then.
Oh yeah, for sure. Yeah, absolutely. I really start with the idea of telling a story. I love telling stories, and for whatever reason, in this crazy old life, that's the position I'm in, is I'm just kind of telling stories through video games. And I don't think, I definitely don't start with mechanics. So I like to I start with an idea or a feeling I want to get across. And here, actually, the feeling that I was trying to get across was that of friendship, kind of mixed with regret, or unexpected outcomes from good intentions. That sort of regret, where you like did something that you thought was the right thing, but it turned out badly. And so that's sort of the feeling that I was sort of starting with. And so I started from there, and then they had like, pirates in an island setting, and it's just really developed it up from there. So the mechanics come out of the story for me. It's not the other way around.
So you said you're pretty far along. What's the plan ahead? When do you think you'll be done with it?
When I go back home, I'm gonna like make a spreadsheet, because I am working on my own, which is awesome, but then there's nobody really to keep me in line. So I'm gonna make a spreadsheet, which I did at the start of the project, that it would be a timeline. I'd love to see it out this year. So definitely, I might, when I really take a hard look at what's left to do, I might decide, okay, this would be cool, but it'll take too long to really put in. I might decide, you know what, this has to be in, and it's going to take a long time, but it just needs to be there. That said, really most of the mechanics are in the game, so it's mostly this time I'm just writing those scenarios and building this stuff up, fixing bugs and stuff like that. So yeah, there's a lot of work to do. I'd love to see it out this year. So I wish I knew myself well enough to know exactly when to be done.
Thank you so much for your time.
You're very welcome. Thank you.
We could change everything.